let me just say this too about supervision real fast, about form, like things you turn into me by the end. Since we're talking about supervision, you need to make sure if you to get your current supervisor, and you might have more than one supervisor if you're at different sites, to do the evaluation for you. If you're having trouble getting that supervisor to do that form, like this is the 7th week. Yeah, let me know that too. And I know that I've already gotten, Mary Jane sent me write-ups. I'm pretty sure from everybody from every site. So I know that she's at least talked to them, because we can get Mary Jane involved to help us coordinate that. Every once in a while, there's a supervisor we have to chase down. Most of the time, it's not a big deal, but just getting that evaluation from your supervisor. So Naeem, like when you go get everything signed off on, if you could get that evaluation. So it's the same evaluation form that you did in Practicum 1 that you turned into Dr. Johnson. You're just doing it for Practicum 2, right? So it's 2 different practicums. It's the same form that you'll turn into me.
Yeah, and if all else fails, like I can't go back to the other clinic, or at least text the supervisor that was supervising me there.
Get
because
that. That's fine.
5% of my hours that I worked there was supervised anyway.
Yeah.
Like it's just like that. I have to be supervised for 5% of my hours anyway.
Right.
So I could just get her to sign it.
Yeah. We just need to have that information on file. We keep that stuff on file even after you guys graduate. All right. Okay. What I'm going to do too at the end of our time tonight, I know it'll be a little bit late, but I'll stick around late after Chris presents and we do some question answer with him. I'll stick around if anyone else has any other class related questions. I'll stick around and talk about those with you guys. So I do want us to have plenty of time for what we're going to talk about tonight. I know that it would be super helpful if you guys could have your video on, unless I know some people sometimes you might be sitting somewhere that you don't want to do that. I understand. It'd be great if you could have your video on. It's always easier when you're speaking to a class, when you can see people's faces at least and not see just their names in a blank screen. And so if you could have your video on at all possible, that'd be awesome. Anytime you have a question tonight, obviously you can raise your hand, like my hand up right here. You can put it in the chat and we'll stop, answer the question. There's going to be plenty of information given, and I'm also going to give you the information that Chris is presenting on. I'm going to put it in the chat here in a second. It's a document, and I'll send it to you in Moodle as well. So I'll give it to you both ways. All right, tonight. Deanne's coming to us live from the headquarters of Zoom in San Francisco. We didn't know that, but
I teleported in.
She's teleporting herself in. You look like you're come off that movie. What's that? The movie about Facebook. It's what I don't know why it looks like the background.
Social something.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Okay. So I want to introduce everyone to Chris Kindle, who's not only a friend of mine. Well, he'll claim me. I think he'll claim me as a friend for the most part.
It depends.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine, and it's interesting because Chris and I met about, I don't even, like 2013 or 14 or
we were 12.
Yeah, long time ago. And he was thinking about going back to school and doing what you guys are doing right now, getting his LPC. And so he was talking to me about it. I'm fairly certain I scared him off from it, so he didn't decide to do it and kept his day job. And he's really really good at his day job. So he's been a CPA and a financial planner and kind of now doing a little CFO work and helping businesses succeed. He's been doing this for a long time. He is the one that helped me not make so many stupid mistakes that I had been making. And so, or if I did make one, I guess I can blame it on him now, but Chris has been instrumental to me just for wisdom's sake in helping me ask the right questions for myself and my business and my practice. And he's also worked with other mental health providers to kind of help them in that way as well. And so I want to introduce Chris to everyone. And then what we're going to do is anytime you guys have a question, like I said, just jump in and ask. And so, Chris, you can take it away.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Chris. And I appreciate our relationship we've had for a long time. It's been very, very fruitful for me. Thank you. Well, it's good to see you guys. Hope you've had a great day today. I promise not to bore you too long, I hope. But the topic on kind of going into business for yourself can be pretty boring, to be honest with you. But we're going to try to lighten it up a little bit as best we can. And as Chris said, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in, shoot a chat over to Chris, and he'll stop us, and we'll address the questions you've got. So most of us have probably been employed, right? We've received a W-2, a paycheck, all those kinds of cool things. And I won't harp too much on what that looks like, but really what we tend to see in the mental health professional world is, what does it look like if I do my own thing? If I hang my own shingle, if I am visiting with other people who want to hang their own shingle, what do we need to know, right? So what I encourage you is that this information is not just for you, but it's those you meet. You're a coach, you're a counselor. So as you hear certain things, you may be triggered to say, hey, what about X, Y, Z? And we'll cover a little bit about this, okay? So hopefully this will be fruitful for you and others around you as we go. I often get the question, not just from mental health professionals, but anyone in the service industry, about how do I know if I'm an entrepreneur or if I'm really designed to be an employee? And it really depends on your risk reward concepts. What internally do you feel like you can put at risk and really enjoy the energy around that? Or do you prefer to be very stable? And the first piece of this, and I think Chris, you'll send that outline around, right?
So I put the outline in the chat, so everyone can pop that. You can grab that off the chat. You should get it. And I'm going to go ahead and send it in Moodle too, just while we're talking.
Cool. So the first question I normally get is, or I ask these folks who are wanting to go into the professional world on their own, is, how do you like your income? Do you prefer it very stable, nice, easy check? I do get the same amount pretty much every time. Or do you like the risk reward of self-employed, and all of a sudden I'm going to have some opportunities out there and leverage other practitioners who work for me or with me, and do all those things where the risk may be higher, but the reward of income can also be higher. So the first thing you have to address for you, your family, is how much risk of your income, how stable do you want your income to be when you start to contemplate this? And that's not an easy question, because most of us, I suspect at this stage, have not been self-employed, but maybe our parents were, or family or friend members were, and we can kind of relate to what they went through in the peaks and the valleys of income, right? So do you like it to be stable? Do you like the risk reward concept? The other question I get a lot is about multitasking. When you go into business for yourself, you have a lot of things to do, and you have a lot of bosses. When you're self-employed, your boss is the IRS, the landlord, all of your patients. Your administrative assistant can be your boss, and I can speak to that one. Without one, I'd be in trouble. But when you're employed elsewhere, where you're getting a W-2, you're being directed by others, you don't have all those things you got to deal with. You're usually just have one direct boss, right? You're reporting to somebody who says, here, go do ABC, or here's your responsibility. That changes a lot in the self-employed world, like I said. And a lot of the questions I get on that is, why am I so overwhelmed with all this? And there's a fantastic resource. It's a book called The E-Myth. There's a new version out there. It's called The E-Myth Revisited. It talks about a very key concept that I want to plant. And that is, do you prefer working on your business or working in your business? And that's a very key difference here. Think of yourself as a CEO of a big company. The CEO of American Airlines does not fly an airplane, but he works on the business of flying airplanes. The pilot works in the business. He's flying an airplane. So what are you more attuned to do? What are you designed and wired to do, working on or working in? And that's a very key concept to understand, that if you're going to go to work as an entrepreneur, self-employed in your own world, you are now an entrepreneur working on your business. And I will tell you, the key thing I get from service practitioners that come to me after they've already done all this cool stuff and they come to me in deep trouble is because they work in their business way too much. I don't want to hire an administrative assistant because it's too expensive. I'll tell you, in my world, in the financial management world, in the investments and insurance world, it was an exponential increase in activity and revenue for me when I hired an administrative assistant. They can save your world. And I think Chris can attest to that too. He's had some good ones over time as well. And so from that perspective, you need folks you can delegate to, that can handle some of the administrative tasks, those kinds of things. So you can continue to work on your business and get a team around you that works in your business and you direct them. Does that make sense?
Let me say something about that too, because this is a really good point. I've worked by myself solo in a practice, and I'm horrible at administration. Now, some of you might be fine at it, but that does take you away from what you really should be doing. When I joined a really good practice, we had a great administrative person, and how we did it, instead of one person paying for it, we had 4 people, right, that went in to help pay for that. And that really helped us a lot. So that's just something else to think about. You don't have to just do things by yourself. That's the big part there to me.
Mm-hmm. A sharing environment is absolutely wonderful. And I've done that as a CPA and investment manager for a long, long time. Now you get to a point to where there's some competing interests at time, but that's just something you and the shared other professionals just have to work through on occasion. The other thing that really is key when considering an employee versus self-employed are the benefits. When you become self-employed, health insurance goes way up. It's not cheap. Retirement planning, if you like your 401k, if you have one now, that's also going to become expensive because there's no employer match anymore. You're it. Paid vacation does not exist when you're self-employed. Unless, however, you're working on your business and you have other professionals you can leverage around you. So you need to remember that not only am I getting rid of those benefits for me, but there are others that may count on you as well for those benefits. That's a key issue, right? So understand that those benefits are available to you as self-employed, but they're extremely expensive. The self-employed policies, the paid vacation, that's money that's not coming in at that time. But what I will say on the retirement planning, there are some great tax attributes about doing this. You can put a lot more money away as a self-employed person than you can as an employee. And it really pays off because you get certain tax deductions for it. But let me assure you, the tax deduction itself does not override the risk reward that you would have as an entrepreneur. It's just you have some nuances there in the tax code that kind of plays in your favor about doing that. Filing taxes, that's another big question I get, self-employed versus a W-2 employee. We're all used to filing a tax return. I hope we are anyway. A tax return for a self-employed individual is not that simple. It is not just a W-2 anymore. It is an income and expense accounting. So you have to put all your activities financially into that tax return. And the problem you have is, do I take a home office deduction? Do I take a mobile phone deduction? What do I do? And we're going to talk in a little bit about getting a set of advisors around you to ask those sets of questions too, to address that issue. But just to understand, your tax return is no longer just putting a W-2 and maybe your charitable contributions in there and filing the return. The return can almost double in size based on what the self-employment world will lead you to. And the regulatory environment is just massive when it comes to, can I take this retirement deduction? Do I have enough income? Do you know how to do depreciation? Those kinds of things on fixed assets. So it gets pretty confusing pretty quick. As an entrepreneur, you reap what you sow. That means working on the business. If you're not out there networking, building new relationships, working on patient development, you're not going to have a whole lot of patient visits in your practice. So you're going to reap what you sow. So I encourage you, and we'll talk about some numbers here in a little bit from a networking perspective, some general benchmarks to kind of help you understand how to measure what you're doing if you're going to be successful in generating patient volume during the weeks and months. But again, just remember that you reap what you sow when you come through that. Any questions at this point on kind of the major differences between entrepreneurship and self-employed? Surely somebody's got a question. Chris, you got a question, don't you?
I think I've got a couple, but I'm going to wait till the end because I've been writing them
Okay.
on the sheet here. And I'm pretty sure you're going to hit them. But I think the big
Okay.
thing that I hear you say right now is, as you're thinking through a couple of big takeaways, do you feel comfortable just getting a paycheck and you know what the paycheck's going to be and you know what the deductions are going to be and that's it and that's all you want to do, versus I'm self-employed and whatever money I bring in, I'm responsible for. I've got to bring it in, and it might be $1 this week and it might be $100 next week, right? So having a little bit of how comfortable are you how comfortable are you with that? How comfortable are you with whatever risk you might be taking? I think that no one ever said that to me starting out at all. I'd never heard anything like that. You always hear, you'll be self-employed, it'll be great. Right? And it's not necessarily that way.
I can't tell you how many folks have come to me when it's way too late. So I encourage you, if you're going to go through this thought process, get some advisors around you really early before you decide to do this. So the earlier you can get engaged with professionals around you is going to really help. Don't let it happen after the fact, because the cleanup is a lot harder than the prevention, right? We're going to jump into a little bit about business planning. If you make the decision to jump out and hang your own shingle, what do you need to know? What do you do? And I'm going to come up with a few homework items for you in this sense that when you decide to do this, here are some things you absolutely have to do. And these are not rocket science at all. It's just a lot of people kind of skip over these, is my experience. But first, you need a written plan. And I don't mean a written plan with a lot of cool words. It's a very long dissertation. This needs to be something that's measurable. How many patient visits do you want in a week? How much money do you need to make to cover your basic expenses? How much money do you need to make to build a retirement? How much money do you need for other things beyond that? How do you want to handle time off? How much time do you want to take off? Build that into your structure. These are things that need some kind of quantifiable, measurable data that can say, I am measuring against this and I'm tracking just like I should be. You're going to hear a concept from me from quite a bit if we get to revisit again at some point, and that is, you cannot measure or manage what you do not measure. You cannot manage what you do not measure. And what I mean by that is, if you tell me I want 25 patient visits a week, I'm going to tell you you're going to need about 250 new networking contacts to generate those 25 patients. And we'll go through those numbers here in a minute. But if you just say, I want a patient volume, and you don't quantify that, I have no target. I have no device to measure against, no benchmark. So again, you cannot manage what you do not measure. What do I need to know when I start up financially? What are the costs of doing an office? How much technology is it going to cost? What do I need to do? I need to do hardware and software. What are the applications? The software as a service? What's that monthly fee? What's all that going to look like? And I'll tell you, that will sneak up on you. Just doing Microsoft Office as an example, Office 365, that will sneak up on you as a business expense, because that licensing gets a little bit more expensive as a business user. A very key concept I always encourage is an emergency fund. Now, we're going to define that here in a little bit, but I need you to understand an emergency fund is very key to the planning concept, as well as paying yourself, because you may go for a while at the very beginning, not have enough income generated from your patient volume to pay yourself. Well, how are you going to pay your own personal bills if you're not generating income from your business? So as a part of the financial planning, how much money do I need to start a business includes how much money do I have in my personal bank account to pay myself and pay my bills. So let's talk about an emergency fund. And this is a concept, if you Heard several practitioners, consultants, and coaches talk about an emergency fund and how much savings do you need. The general rule of thumb is if you take 3 to 6 months of your personal basic expenses, food, shelter, housing, 3 to 6 months of those numbers, that's what you need in savings. And that's not a rainy day fund. I just need to go spend money. That is your emergency savings. So why such a broad range of 3 to 6 months? If you're single and no one's really relying upon you, 3 months makes a lot of sense. It's just you. But if you have a family, you have kids, you have others depending upon you, I'm going to tell you, you need 6 months money in the bank just to have that extra cushion. That's in case you have a valley in your income and you got to pay some bills. You get sick and you can't go see your patients. Just like a vacation, you don't have income at that point. You need to rely upon that money in case something goes bump in the night. So 3 to 6 months of your basic expenses of food, shelter, and clothing. I do get the question every once in a while, should I include my debt payments in there? That's a great question. I would say you probably do if you're really conservative to keep things alive, but you're going to hear me say a lot, I don't like debt. And Chris has heard me say this a lot. I don't like debt. So if you can go into business without debt, you're ahead of the game. I promise you. You don't want to pay the bank their fees if you can avoid it. And so I'm going to get to the next concept about going into debt to fund a startup. Why would you want to start in a financial hole by going into credit card debt, borrowing a bank loan, doing something like that to start a business, especially a service business? If you are buying real estate, makes sense. I've got collateral that's going to go up in value. What's the value of a mental health practice? That value is you. A bank is not going to necessarily lend on you. They can't take you as collateral. So why would you want to start in a debt hole to start a service business? So I never recommend going into debt to start a service business. You need to have that money saved through what's a sinking fund concept. And with sinking fund, what that means is I'm going to save money over time, all the way up to what I think my total spend needs to be to start a business. I'm going to save that over time and put it in savings and then start my business when I reach that number. Don't start a new business without having that sinking fund or your savings for your spend in the bank. Don't do it. You are basically self-financing by doing a sinking fund, if that makes sense. So save before you do it. It's like saving for a down payment on a house. You're saving to start a new business. Don't go into debt to do that, especially credit cards. Pretty clear so far? Any questions? Everybody good? Everybody still awake? All right. Set of advisors. Who do you need to get around you? And this is very key and it's very important. One, those people you trust, right? Be it family, friends, others around you. But I'm going to tell you, you also need to get some people around you that will tell you no. If you surround yourself with a bunch of yes people, then you're not going to really hear the truth about a lot of things. And as professionals, we know this. The first one out of the gate is a CPA. Now, it's getting tougher and tougher to find CPAs in the market. I'm one of them that got out, retired, hallelujah, thank you, baby Jesus, out of the business. But you need to get a CPA around you, not just for tax reasons, but for choice of entity that we'll cover here in just a little bit, but somebody that's going to help advise you when you call to understand, how do I do my accounting? How do I handle the tax? What do I need to know about ABC? Do I need additional insurance? Do I not? How do I do a budget? What if I'm under budget? What do I do? How do I manage cash better? That's where a CPA can come in, a good financial management style CPA. And I would say this is somebody that in their background, if you're interviewing for CPAs, that not has done just tax returns, but probably somebody who's got a little bit of an audit background about them too. Someone who's gone into business, done audits, understand the pitfalls of being in business as an auditor, also understands taxes, but that breadth of knowledge is very key for you to start your business with. Next on the list is an attorney. An attorney is very key because you're going to have several things you've got to do. One is you're going to have certain contracts, perhaps with certain providers, maybe. If you're doing work for a corporation, they're going to want to have an MSA, a master services agreement, something along those lines. So you need an attorney to ask, how do I handle this contract issue? Or can you draft me a contract? Or I want to hire a practitioner to work with me, under me, I need an employment agreement. That's where an attorney would come in and help you design and produce that employment agreement. An attorney would also file for you the entity type. Do you have a question, Chris?
Yeah, I want to say something about the attorney part real quick. That that part you can, there's a couple of different ways mental health professionals can go about some of those things. The first thing is when you purchase your malpractice insurance, I think the first or second class we talked about, the one I use is CPH. That's what most people use mental health wise. They do offer free legal services for you for just consulting, like they'll just consult with you for certain things. They'll also help you with other things if like there's fees you can pay if you want to do other things with them. The other thing is with your Texas, when you become an associate and into your full licensure, both the LPC and the LMFT, the state boards have attorneys that help mental health providers as well. You can contact that board and say, hey, you can basically figure out those services. They'll be listed on the websites that I've given you. Those are just two areas legal wise that you can find help. I think one of the things that Chris is saying that's smart is finding someone that's like an advisor, like he's saying, like if I have a question, I just need to real quick, can I get hey, what do you think about this real quick kind of thing? Or what do you think about these things? Versus I've got a real client problem potentially where I might have to be subpoenaed to go to court. Those are a little bit different kinds of things, right? What Chris is talking about and what I was describing in terms of like reaching out to attorneys, your malpractice insurance and your particular board that you're licensed with will give you help if you're ever subpoenaed. Or like I got subpoenaed about a month ago. My records got subpoenaed. So I had to call them and kind of contact because the subpoena I got was a little fuzzy to me. I hadn't seen one like it before. And so I had to get help with that versus what Chris is saying, like legally wise, like if I want to create an entity, that's a little bit different. Does that make sense? I just want to just have a little bit of distinction there. Does anyone have questions about those parts?
Yeah, to kind of press on about that a little bit. What we're talking about is an attorney that may be a litigator if there's a subpoena involved versus an attorney that does business.
Yeah, it's two little bit different things.
Yep. There are attorneys that have specialties, if you will.
Yep.
And the same with CPAs. There are CPAs that have specialties as well, and that's where I kind of encourage you to get a CPA that's pretty well rounded. The other, now I'm gonna come back to this point here in a little bit, but CPAs and attorneys also make for great networking, especially an attorney. If there's stuff going on in the family, a lot of times the attorneys know about it, and the CPAs do as well. So they are great networking, but we'll cover that here in just a little bit about those resources. Another one is insurance agent. Multiple types of insurance agents. There are insurance agents on every street corner. So what we have to be careful about is being oversold. This is where your CPA and your attorney even, or someone else can help understand what insurance do you really need, but I'll cover some of the basics with you. One is obviously your own health insurance. That's pretty much a given. The other is the property and casualty, P&C insurance. You have certain professional insurance. I'm sure Chris can discuss in more greater detail. That's a little bit beyond my scope, but P&C is really not only personal, but in business. If I have business assets, computers, desks, those kinds of things, that needs to be covered as a property insurance, just like you would your home, right? You can also have an umbrella policy, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever the number is. And honestly, that's cheap insurance and it's well worth it. So you get umbrella insurance to protect your personal assets. So if somebody decides to sue you and for whatever reason goes after your personal assets, that umbrella policy is in place to protect you. You need that personally. And you can also get it professionally, but more often than not, I would imagine your profession has that coverage as a part of the overall policy.
Yeah, when you sign up for coverage, you'll see 2 or 3 options. One's just a regular malpractice type policy, and you can add the P&C on there as well. And you can there's a couple other options. They actually have a new option now that also covers telehealth types of services, which is good. So when you sign up for your malpractice insurance, you should see multiple types of coverage you can get. Naturally, you do pay for each one of those coverages, but it's really a yearly price. I'm going to make this number up because I can't remember the price for all three. Let's say $400 for a year. That's pretty cheap, really, for what potentially could happen.
The other that I have on here as far as getting an advisor around you is a financial advisor. We've heard of investment advisors, those kinds of things, but I'm going to say get a planner around you to help understand how to start saving money for the future, retirement, kids' college, all those kinds of things. Those of us who have daughters and granddaughters, you need to start saving for weddings. I assure you, those things are expensive. So from that perspective, a financial advisor will help you understand, where do I put my money at the level of risk that's acceptable to me? And a financial planner is a licensed individual. You need to be sure they're licensed, and you need to be sure this person is trustworthy and honest, and it's probably somebody you already know, most likely. Your CPA can also help you with some of this. Some CPAs do both. I usually like to have those separate because I don't like all that knowledge in one place, and sometimes they're trying to sell product that's not sensical. I want a real licensed professional on the financial planning side. So financial advisor is a great networking opportunity for you as well that we'll cover here in just a little bit too. Any questions on the advisory guys around you? Everybody good? All right, entity type. So once we get deep into starting a business, we've made the decision, we're going to go into self-employment and we're going to dive into setting up our own entity. First thing we need to understand from our CPA and our attorney is, what type of entity do we want to be? And in the outline that I put out there, that Chris put out there, there is a chart, there's a matrix that gives you the very basic concepts of entity types. There's a lot of detail here, and I'm not going to cover every box of the matrix. I'm going to give you what is typical for a licensed professional. The state of Texas is wonderful to work with in this regard, much better than any other state I've dealt with. Texas has a concept, it's called an LLC, a limited liability company. A lot of us have probably heard of that. Conceptually, what an LLC does is it puts a legal veil around your business. So if I'm a patient and I decide to sue my professional healthcare provider, I sue that entity because that's where the service was performed. That legal veil protects that provider's personal assets from my lawsuit, except in one very unique circumstance. If the litigator, if the attorney that I've hired to sue that practitioner finds that you have commingled business and personal expenses, your legal veil just got busted. I can now go after your personal assets. Very key concept to be aware of. I see this a lot. None of these entity structures will help if you commingle business and personal expenses. If you need a new pair of Nikes, buy them with your personal assets, your credit card, your checking account, your cash. Do not buy them inside the business. If your kids need clothes, do not buy them inside the business. If you need lunch that is not business related, buy that with your personal money, not your business money. You have to keep that legal veil in place for this concept to work, okay? Entity type. What we see more often in the state of Texas is a form of LLC called a PLLC, a professional limited liability company. A professional LLC means you are licensed and the state of Texas acknowledges that license and gives you a special legal veil as a professional. Again, it's a legal veil concept, but it's just got a professional certification around it that's unique. Then that is how the state of Texas looks upon you. Every legal veil is granted by each state in the union. That is not a federal concept at all. The IRS, the federal government, doesn't recognize an LLC in that sense. They don't care. States give you that legal veil. So if you go to Oklahoma and provide services there, you need to get an LLC there if you're working out of an office there. This is where this telehealth concept comes into play, right? Because if you're not licensed in a particular state and you're doing coaching, not counseling, then you got a whole nother set of circumstances and issues, right? That PLLC may not protect you. So that's is where you need to get that legal advisor or your professional advisors to help you understand, when I start providing services outside of the state of Texas, what does that mean for me? Now, remember what I said is that the state of Texas gives you this legal veil. How does the IRS look at you federally? More often than not, we suggest an S corporation in this matrix. What is an S corporation? It's a unique corporation that's limited to 100 shareholders inside the entity. Well, technically, you're going to be it. So you got the one. You'll see on here that it's same state kind of filing. It's a PLLC taxed as an S corporation. There are two ways for you to pull money out of an S corporation. One way is required. You have to draw a W-2 compensation as an employee of your own corporation. The other way to draw money is through a distribution. And again, a CPA will help you understand these, but generally what we're talking about is I have to pay myself a reasonable payroll because the IRS wants you to pay Social Security. That's the only reason they make you do that. And guess who's paying the employee and employer portion of Social Security? You are. You don't have an employer paying his half for you. You're paying all of it, 15+%. So what we do is we get a reasonable salary for a reasonable title in a reasonable sized company. Say, here's your salary. Any money above and beyond that you want to pull out, you pull it out as a shareholder distribution. Think of it as a corporate dividend. Okay. There's a lot of tax nuances about how to account for that, how to deal with that. Again, I'll guide you toward your CPA advisor on how to deal with that, but just understand, I think the general concept that you need to understand is you want the legal veil of a PLLC and you want the tax advantages that an S Corp can provide you until the government decides to take that away. And that is a topic of discussion in the federal government, but we'll not go into that can of worms right now. Any questions on the entity as far as a PLLC S Corp?
I have a question about, you said separate your personal versus your business, but if you have an LLC or a PLLC, you'll have a separate bank account for that, separate than your personal bank account. So you're getting all of your income into that bank account, but at some point you need to pay yourself.
Mhm.
And so do you just transfer the money from one
Yes.
bank account to the other?
You
Okay.
do. Exactly right. That's a great question, Emma. And the way you would do that, the accounting term is called a distribution.
Okay.
I'm going to distribute money from my business bank account to my personal bank account. That's the only way I get money out of my business, is that distribution as a PLLC.
Okay.
The other side also happens. What if my business bank account is running low and I need money? I can make a contribution personally to the business.
Okay.
So you got contributions in, distributions out.
Okay. So, so I actually have an LLC for my current career. And that's how I've done things. But do I need to establish a different
Yes.
LLC for this career then?
Yes, you do. It's another great question because we have several people have several entities, right? And the reason you want to separate is I want to separate the risk. I don't want your other business, if something goes crazy over there, to impact your counseling business and vice versa. So it's a risk separation issue, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
Like I have a real estate business. I've got a CFO business. Those two things are in separate entities.
Just separate. Okay. And you have two separate names. You file two separate LLC things. You have two separate bank accounts. You make your contributions and distributions all separate. Okay,
Now,
that makes sense.
be absolutely certain, Emma, that you don't commingle funds between the two businesses either. So if you need to make a distribution, you make it to your personal account, and then from your personal account as a contribution to the other business if you have to. Do not transfer money between the two businesses.
Okay.
That makes sense?
It does, yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
I think the other thing in Emma's, I don't know if this is part of your question, but the other thing to remember is that from your PLLC, you will also pay yourself, right? Like you'll pay yourself a wage. And so that's like your payroll, like you'll run a payroll to yourself, right? So that would be, you know, whether you do that weekly or monthly or however you, you know, you do that however you want. That's
Yeah.
that's part of the other way that you get paid too.
If I can, again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because this will take us the rest of the evening. You would pay yourself a wage in the scenario that I'm giving you as an S corporation.
Yeah.
If you are self-employed, just simply as a PLLC with the state of Texas with no corporation filing,
Like just a sole proprietor, let's say.
sole proprietor, then you are not allowed to pay yourself a wage. You only take money as a distribution. If you are a partner in a partnership, you do not pay yourself a wage. You either have a guaranteed payment or a distribution. Only in a corporate environment, if you're an S Corp or a C Corp, you actually write yourself a payroll check. And that's in this chart. You'll see down there's a line for compensation. You'll see that in there, how you can take money out of your entity, depending on what it is. But just remember, as a corporation, you're required to take a payroll. Anything above and beyond that, you can take as a dividend distribution. All the others, you take it as a distribution. And I would keep this chart as your reference. It's a pretty handy little chart. It doesn't give you the whole world, but this generally will give you an idea of what you need to do to keep out of trouble from a compensatory perspective. But again, this is where the CPA would help you as well.
I got a question. I got several questions. Well, one is when you said a sole proprietor versus the other one, the corporation. Are you saying that if I don't have any workers, employees, that's the difference? So I'm trying to understand.
No, it's you don't have to have any workers. In a corporate environment, you are both a worker and a shareholder. You are an employee and an owner in a corporate environment, be it S Corp or C Corp. As a self-employed, you're an owner and you're taking a distribution. You can still be self-employed as a Schedule C sole proprietor and have employees, and you would pay payroll to them, but you would not pay payroll to you. You would only take a distribution. Again, it's only in that corporate environment, that corporate veil, if you will, from the IRS, that you would pay yourself a payroll, no matter if it's just you or other employees with you.
Okay, and then is the LLC and the PLLC, is that the same thing or there's something different?
They are almost very near the same thing. The only difference between the PLLC is that the state recognizes your license as a professional. Like my real estate entity is an LLC because there is no professional license in that sense. I'm not a real estate salesperson. I'm just a real estate investor, right? So I've got my real estate holdings sitting in an LLC. As a professional CPA, I have a PLLC because that is a CPA license given by the state of Texas to me. So I have a PLLC and an LLC. Chris Bedard, Chris, if I can use you as an example, you have a PLLC because of Chris's LMFT license. That PLLC only designate, it's only recognizing you have a professional certificate granted by the state of Texas.
Yeah, all of you will be licensed by the state. So when you're licensed by the state, you're automatically a professional limited liability corporation or a PLLC.
And that's how you would file with the state of Texas. That's how your CPA and your attorney will then do the filing for you in that sense. They're going to put it together as a PLLC.
But if any of you decided to do, like there's a lot of folks now in the mental health world that do coaching, right? And you wanted to be a coach, then you could be an LLC. You wouldn't have to be a PLLC because there's no
license
for that. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yes.
So I have one more question about this. I don't think it's too much in the weeds, but so an LLC, if you had an LLC and you wanted to pay yourself, it's not a W-2 like salary. You just go and say, you made $1,000 this week, pay yourself, and then you 1099 that income. Is that no?
No. So as a sole proprietor LLC, that account, you're going to be paying tax on the net income from the accounting. So that distribution is not an expense. If it's not an expense, it's not a 1099. So as a self-employed person, you're doing an accounting on your tax return on a very specific form called Schedule C.
Mhm.
And that is where you're going to end up calculating how much tax I owe. Now, and we're going to get to this a little bit later, as an associate, you go to work somewhere and maybe they bring you on as an associate and a 1099 contractor. That 1099, yes, would be reported as income on your tax return, either on a Schedule C or a separate. It's going to depend on the circumstance. The CPA will help you with that. But you would get reported from somebody you're contracting with as a 1099, pay tax on that, okay? I will say that also what I've seen in the mental health world and really in my world as well, I'll get a 1099 from my business clients. So if you provide services to an employee group as a part of an employee benefit package, if you will, that an employer does, they may send you a 1099. You would put that on your Schedule C as income. And you would then include that as your income calculation to pay tax on your Schedule C. And like I say, this could get really confusing, but as a sole proprietor, you're going to do a Schedule C.
Mhm.
As a corporation, you're going to file a corporate return that net number then goes into your personal return. So you're going to have 2 tax returns to file as a corporation. As a sole proprietorship, you have 1 tax return to file that has an additional form in it called a Schedule C.
So what's the correct way to pay yourself from a PLLC?
As a distribution, your business bank account, you'll just write a check, and in that little memo line, I always encourage you to put distribution.
Okay.
You put that into your personal bank account and you're good, you're fine. And then when we do the accounting, which we'll talk about here in a little bit in the finance and accounting and tax section, then that's where the net income is going to come out and say, okay, here's what Deanne is going to owe in taxes as a result of the net income from her practice.
Yeah, I think, Chris, if you wouldn't mind, let's jump to that.
Okay.
Because that's always going to be a big question for people. If they say, hey, I don't know if I want to jump into the S Corp world, so I'm going to stick in this kind of sole proprietor world. What's the tax benefits,
Sure.
risk, right? If I think that could be super helpful.
Okay. From a tax as a result of everything else that's happened historically, tax in itself is just not created out of thin air. You have to have an accounting. We now have a business bank account. We do all of our ins and outs of the business bank account. Our insurance providers are sending money to us. Our patients are paying us. We have business expenses that are coming out of our bank account for rent, insurance, other administrative items, supplies. You're buying furniture for your office, those kinds of things. So I've got income, I've got expenses. We need to account for that first before I can even think about doing the tax. And that accounting is very clear that you have to do it almost every day. And the system that I'm going to recommend for everybody is QuickBooks Online. It's simple, it's easy, it's basic. You don't need anything elaborate. And QuickBooks Online will do something that's very key. It will link to your bank account. So as a transaction goes through your bank account, it will get recorded to QuickBooks. So if I went out and I took you out to lunch as a business meal, that transaction will come through my debit card into my QuickBooks. And here it is that we went to DeVivo Brothers for lunch. It's sitting in QuickBooks. Now I need to tell it where that expense needs to go. Business meals. Or landlord, if I paid the landlord rent, it'll come into QuickBooks as it went through my bank account. I need to put it to rent. It'll do the accounting of the incomes and expenses for you. Then you tell it in your chart of accounts what that item was for. Then at a periodic basis, and we'll cover what those periods are, but let's just say for tax return reasons, on an annual basis, our QuickBooks is going to tell us, here's our net income for the year. Our income minus our expenses. Oh, by the way, as I alluded a while ago, that distribution that you're paying yourself as a sole proprietor is not an expense. You don't get to deduct that. That's a part of your income distribution. Your expenses are your rent, your utilities, your overhead, those kinds of things, not how much I paid myself as a sole proprietor. So when you get to your net income, that activity, as I said a while ago, is going to be recorded on Schedule C of your tax return. And that tax return title is basically sole proprietor. You are self-employed, and I need you, Ms. Taxpayer, Mr. Taxpayer, to record your income and expenses on this form. That then goes to the front of your tax return to get included in your income that you pay tax on at that point in time. Okay? That's an annual filing with Schedule C, with QuickBooks accounting for your income and your expenses. Here's where I get a lot of people coming to me in an oh my goodness, what do I do problem. Remember, as an employee, you are paid a W-2. What comes out of your paycheck when they give you one? Income taxes, Social Security taxes, perhaps benefit costs. You are now self-employed. You are not going to have an employer paying or withholding those taxes on your behalf. You have to do it yourself every quarter. And I'm going to give you some very key dates, but just to know that in your mind, we need to do an estimated tax payment to the IRS 4 times a year. And it is going to be initially based on your net income for that quarter times an effective tax rate, gives you how much you need to pay to the IRS. Unfortunately, the IRS does not understand the concept of calendar quarter, so I'm going to have to give you these dates. It's in the notes. I'm going to give it to you. Don't laugh at the IRS. They're having enough trouble as it is. Estimated tax dates. The first one is April 15th. Well, guess what? That's also the day that your personal tax return is due. And if you owe money on your personal tax return and you owe an estimated tax, you got a double whammy. That's when most clients come to me in an uh-oh moment. I don't have enough money because they forgot there's a double whammy on April 15th. That's a calendar quarter, because what you're doing is you're calculating your net accounting, your net income, January, February, March, the true calendar quarter end. It's due 15 days after that calendar quarter end. This is where the IRS gets really wonky. The next due date is June 15th. I don't know how they came up with that. That's for the accounting for the months of April and May. So whatever you make, your net income in April and May times an effective tax rate is what you're going to owe to the government on June 15th. The next due date is September 15th. That's going to be for June, July, and August accounting. Is going to be due on September 15th. The next one is January 15th that takes the rest of the year into play. Remember those 4 key dates, they're very key. If you lose track of those, there are penalties and interest that get incurred if you don't pay on time. And that's normally when we do the tax return, it's got penalties and interest because the payments were not made. That's where I get a lot of complaints. There's nothing I can do about it. You got to do your estimated tax. Again, this is where your CPA will be very helpful to you to understanding, hey, provide them the QuickBooks access. That's another unique benefit of QuickBooks Online. To backtrack to that a little bit, it allows you to allocate professionals to look at your QuickBooks with you. It's an online system, so they can log in at the same time you are and see what you're seeing. Or they can log in and correct things that maybe we posted to the wrong place. So it allows them to take a look at it and walk through with you the accounting and then do your estimated taxes for you. Okay, makes sense? All right, income and deductions as a sole proprietor, self-employed individual. A question I get a lot is, what can I deduct? Anything that is a very specific direct business expense, rent for an office, furniture for your office can be fully depreciated. Utilities, supplies, those things are really, really easy when they're a direct expense. How about your mobile phone? How would you do that? Well, I'll tell you, the IRS doesn't hound you about mobile phones too much because it's not enough money for them to get too busy by. But I will advise that if you can do an analysis to say, I am taking my business calls on my phone. I'm going to deduct a portion of that phone. But let me address this security problem with this. You really don't want your patients having your personal cell phone, do you? That's problematic. So I would advise from a security perspective, don't use your cell phone for business. Get a business line itself or another cell phone. If you have a uniquely identified business cell phone, that cost is 100% deductible. What if I pay my kids to work for me as employees? Yes, you can deduct that as payroll cost. If you have your kids working for you or some other person working for you contract-wise, there's contract labor. Let's just say I need to hire an administrative assistant to work for me as needed, ad hoc. That's probably going to be a 1099 person, a contractor for you, and you can deduct that payment to them. So just know that anything that's directly related to the business, go ahead and do that. Anything that you're not sure about, ask your CPA. But in your profession, I would not advise using a mobile phone as a part of your practice. But if you do an estimate, maybe 50%, maybe 25% of it is deductible. The other question I get is home office deduction. What if I work out of my home as a telehealth professional? That cost is deducted, but there is a new IRS rule in the last few years that makes it really easy. It's called the simplified method. If your house, if the office that you work out of is a 10 by 10 room, 100 feet times $5 a foot, I get to deduct $500 for that home office. Okay, pretty simple, pretty easy. Your CPA will walk you through that. You can do the long version where I say the 100 square foot room relative to the rest of the house, maybe it's a 10% of the total house. I get 10% of my utilities, 10% of my interest on my mortgage, 10% of certain other things like landscape, that kind of thing, right? You can do that, but you're going to need to prove those expenses. You can't just say, this is what I think it is, go for it. That is where the IRS will get engaged with you. They don't like that. So we usually go about the simplified method because that's the easiest way to go about doing that. The question becomes that I get quite often is, can I take a home office deduction and if I have my own office? I'm a little bit aggressive about that and I say yes, because I'm conducting business out of both places. There are tax court rulings that have said no, and there are tax court rulings that have said yes. I'm taking the one that's most advantage to my client in that sense. But telehealth now in the current post-COVID world is a big deal. We're getting a lot of questions of how to deal with this, and the IRS is not really sure how they want to handle it in their aspects of audit either. But again, ask your CPA how they would prefer to do it. They may be very conservative. They may say, no, let's take advantage of it while we can. But just know that that's a question you may need to address is, how do I want to take home office deduction?
I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier we were talking about contracts. What if I got a question? Like what I'm doing my practicum at now is Millwood, and when they hire like for PRN, they give you a contract. Do I need to take that contract to a CPA, let them look at, or
no?
How does that
I wouldn't. If it were me, I wouldn't advise it. What's going to happen is that entity is going to give you a 1099 most likely, right? Or a W-2.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume it's a contract as a contractor, right, to them. That 1099 is basically your self-employment income, and you're going to pay tax on that number. Now, what I'm going to encourage you is to take certain expenses against that. Like if you have business meals related to it, if you're using your cell phone as a part of that business, take a portion of that. If you're doing work out of your home as a result of that, that may be an option too, depending on the circumstance. And that's where the CPA, most of us have a checklist we go through to say, hey, if they meet these requirements, then we're going to take it. Okay.
Okay.
So that 1099 is self-employment income.
And Chris, is there still a deduction for driving?
Very unique circumstance only.
Mileage.
Yeah, very unique circumstance only for healthcare professionals and even for CPAs like us. And I'm going to put it in this sense. Think of it in two buckets: commute miles and business miles.
Yep.
Commute miles even apply to self-employed people. So if I drive from my home to a client, I don't get to deduct that because I actually have a physical office elsewhere. That is my nexus per the IRS. So it's considered a commute mile. But if I drive from my office, because I've gone from home to office, then I go to my client from my office, that's a business mile. And I do get to deduct that.
Yep.
So there are very specific rules that get very confusing. Just know that you have to establish a nexus. So if my home is my only office, then yes, I would deduct it because I have nowhere else to commute to. My commute is from the kitchen to my office. Big deal.
So if I work at Millwood, which is a mental health facility, and that's where I work, that's my office, and I
That is your
drive
office.
there,
That's commute.
that's commute.
Yep. But if I go from there to another hospital or clinic,
Yeah.
that's business.
Right.
So the IRS had a very big tax court case decades ago about this, and that's where this nexus is created, both for home office and for mileage.
Yeah.
Where do you really conduct your business? The tax court case was a radiologist, right? He had a home office. He deducted miles between his house and the hospital, blah, 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 blah. Well, his nexus is not his home. Where does he actually perform his work? In the surgery center. That's his nexus for the IRS. So all those deductions got disallowed. You have to think about, where is my home base? Where is my work base? Home is commute. Work base is business. There's another thing I want to encourage you to in QuickBooks, the online system. I do this, it helps a lot. For those business miles, track them. It's easy to lose track of your miles. So track them in QuickBooks. They've got a little mileage report or a little mileage application menu item down at the bottom left. Click it and record, I went from here to there. And it will automatically calculate the miles, and it will automatically calculate the tax deduction you're allowed to take to do that with. It's very easy.
So you're saying that I can get, I can claim mileage from my home to Millwood?
No.
Or
No.
from Millwood to anywhere else?
Millwood to another clinic, you can.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
I'll put the link to QuickBooks in the chat too, by the way, just if you guys want to check it out.
Yeah, just if I'm starting from home, most likely those miles are not going to be deductible unless this is the only office I've got. But if you're working at Millwood, that then establishes your nexus there at Millwood. From there to another facility is deductible. From Millwood back home is not. It can get pretty confusing. Thank you, IRS. Everybody good? Chris, how we doing on time?
Good. I think it would be helpful.
Can we touch a little bit on networking, or is that?
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. Here's what I'd like to do. We're gonna shift gears a little bit from the tax income discussion, and we want to jump into this kind of networking and marketing area for a second. So before we do that, does anyone else have any other questions about what we've been talking about the last 30 or 40 minutes? Because you can't ask any more questions after this. This is it. This is your only shot.
You're so mean.
You can tell people that have had me in class before because they laugh, and everyone else is like, is he serious? Is this really? Is this the thing? Because
your questions at this point have been very good, and I really appreciate them. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is a good discussion, Chris. This idea of the pipeline,
Okay.
developing a pipeline. I think that could be really helpful.
All right. As an entrepreneur, you think you're a clinician, you think you're in the business of mental health therapy. Actually, you're in the business of sales. If you're going to be self-employed, you need people to talk to. Now, I want you to think of the concept of a pipeline. I'm going to feed the pipeline with good quality stuff so I can get good quality stuff out of the end of that pipeline, right? I've got to feed something in it to get something out of it. And this is where I see a lot of service professionals, me included early on in my career, not really understand this concept. That I'm thinking, hey, I got my license, people will just come to me. Or I talk to a pastor, or I talk to another mental health provider, or I talk to an MD, and they'll start sending me people. That's not true. For some people it is. Like Chris, he's just natural. People gravitate towards him because he's such a good looking guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But for others of us, we have to feed the beast. Okay. So what I'm going to give you may be a little bit uncomfortable, but remember what I talked about a while ago. You can only manage what you measure. And I'm going to give you a benchmark that will change as you do your work. Okay. Everybody's got a different one, but I need to give you a starting place of what is a pipeline, what gets fed into it, and how do I know if my pipeline is successful? First, I want you to think of 3 aspects: a contact, a prospect, and a patient, or the end result that you're looking for. Okay. I'm going to define these. Patient is self-explanatory. I'll not define that, but a contact is somebody we've never met. We don't know anything about them, but how to contact them, hence the term. I know their email, I know the phone number, I've been referred to them by somebody else, but I've never met them. Brand new contact. A prospect is somebody I've met with, and they have prospective business with me, or I have prospective business with them. It is an opportunity. It's a prospect. All right. It's very key that we understand those 2 things that very differently, because how we manage in a little bit is going to be dictated by those concepts. So I'm going to give you a general rule for pipeline development. How do new service professionals start to feed into this pipeline to get patient visits on the end of this thing, which is your ultimate goal? Okay. Generally speaking, in a service world, 10 contacts will generate 4 prospects, which will generate 1 result that you're looking for, or in this case, a patient or a qualified networking person. Okay, so 10, 4, 1. 10 contacts, 10 people I've never met will result in 4 prospects that have some opportunities for me or me for them, and then we will get, on average, 1 person out of that. If I need 25 patient visits a week, do the math. That means I need 250 contacts to get 25 patients a week as a new startup professional. Hence, you're not a professional in therapy anymore. You are now a sales professional until you can get a pipeline that is self-sustaining. That's why this benchmark as a new professional is very important, because, hey, I talked to 2 people this week. That should be enough, right? No, it's not. Now, your family members are great prospects in a lot of cases. Your friends are great prospects. They're not new contacts. Your mother, bless her heart, will give you everybody in the world, okay? But we need to develop relationships outside of that that will create a self-sustaining world for us in our business, okay? Pastoral care ministers, other professionals like yourself that have different specialties than you do, MDs, HR managers at large businesses, they're great to talk to. School professionals are great to talk to. And I hate this idea, but it works. Divorce attorneys are great networking for a lot. Now you have to hound them because they won't call you. You have to call them. You have to hound them until they give you something, right? Just understand that other professionals, specifically service professionals, are who you want to feed your pipeline with. So I'm going to give you an example. If I'm getting 10 contacts, but I'm only getting 1 prospect, what does that tell you about the quality of the contact? Probably not very good, right? So that's where Dear Sweet Sainted Mother is probably not your best contact or prospect, but the HR professional at XYZ company is probably a great prospect for you. But I want you to think of networking as a 2-way street. It's not just who's going to feed the beast for you. You get to feed the beast for them also. So you may visit with an insurance person, your own advisor as an example. They know a lot of people. On average, an insurance agent will have 400 customers. That's a lot of people for them to touch, right? Well, that can be helpful to you as well, but you can also feed them business if you have contacts that you come across that don't have an insurance agent or looking for somebody new. It's tit for tat, right? I'm going to help you, you help me. That's what networking is all about. So we've got to continue to feed the pipeline, but over time it becomes self-sustaining. Like I said, once you have an established set of clientele, For me, in the accounting world, my clients are recurring every month, every quarter, every year. That really is helpful. That's not necessarily the case for you. So you're going to have more front end feeding of the pipeline as opposed to somebody like me who has a recurring business stream. Does that make sense? So you're going to have to go out there and generate and maintain and manage this pipeline for the rest of your career. Some people love it. Some people don't. I'm going to go back and reference the very beginning of this conversation. You are your own boss in that sense. You have to go develop your clientele. If that's not something that's appealing to you and feeding the pipeline, that may be an indicator. Maybe you're not the self-employed type. But if you love to talk to people, other professionals, and if you can get over this little hurdle, and I'm going to challenge you to ask a question to everybody you meet. Who do you know that I will enjoy meeting? And then get quiet. You know, as a trained professional, getting quiet can have a lot of different impacts. In sales, it's the same idea. Who do you know that I would enjoy meeting? And your objective, remember, we can't manage what we don't measure, is to get at least 3 names when you ask that question. And that's hard to do because you are now selling your services, and that gets a little bit personal, right? I'm not selling a widget, I'm selling me as a counseling professional, right? So that's a challenge for you. 2 aspects I want you to think about: feed the pipeline. 10 contacts gives you 4 prospects, gives you 1 result that you're looking for. And ask the question, who do I know? Who do you know that I would enjoy meeting? And it's very key that you ask it that way, because I'm asking that person across from me to qualify the people that I want to meet by saying, I would enjoy meeting. I don't want to meet every Tom, Dick, and Harry, because not every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to be fruitful for me. Who do you know that I would enjoy meeting? I'm asking for their perception of me to gauge and filter out and call for me, if you will, who's going to be good for me to meet, or who is going to be good for me to meet them so I can help them somehow and bless them.
I want to say something about that too. So there's a couple of other areas that people don't think about to have as a contact. Hairdressers, or at any place like a salon, at an estheticians. And the reason why is because when people go there, what do? They talk, and those folks know people's problems, because that's all they hear all day long is people's problems. Those 2 places are good. The other place are financial planners. They always hear about money problems, especially with families and couples, if that's what you want to do. If you're heading more towards the adolescent world, every school district has a referral list. And a lot of times they're long, like there could be 50 people, depending on the school district. When I was living in Keller, I was on our practice was on the list, but we were so far down. So what you have to do is go and meet the counselors at the schools, right? So most school districts now also have professional counselors on staff that you can meet with and network with, that you can talk to. Assistant principals a lot of times handle a lot of the discipline. You can meet with them. So that's like, if you're going to go kind of towards the adolescent or the kid world, go to the world of the client that you're trying to get, basically. If I built like half my practice in Denton through several salons, me and another couple of folks, and we got a ton of people that way. And then I built in Keller. At one point I had couples coming from pastors that I had never met, because I had met other pastors and I had worked with other clients, and they were coming to see me because of so-and-so told so-and-so. But that was after 3 years, right? So when Chris is talking about this building, these contacts, think about it long-term, right? Don't think about it like, oh my gosh, I got to do this next week. Well, 18 months is about what it takes to build a practice, right around 18 months, 20 months, something like that, right? That doesn't mean you need to wait 12 months and start. That means from when you start building, then 18 months, right? So if you start your practice and you're like, I'm pretty good, I got a little money saved, I can wait, and 3 months later, 4 months later, 6 months later, okay, now I need to get some contacts. That's when your time starts. Does that make sense? But some of these places you just don't think, people don't think about, those are just other areas that and you guys know plenty of people
Mhm.
to talk to. Of course, I'm super extroverted, so that was never a problem for me because I can talk to anybody about anything. But if you join a group, because I had a couple of people, and Chris knows a couple of people in my former practice, did not like that. They're very introverted and they didn't like that piece of it. But we had a couple of people that liked doing it. So we kind of did that for the rest of the practice. That's the other thing, is if you join with people, you can kind of, you can kind of use their extrovertedness to your advantage. But it just takes time. So when you see that 250 people, if you think about it, you could write a list of probably 100 people right now that you could talk to, more than likely, at least 50, at least.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's good. I'm glad you brought that kind of ratio up. That's good.
I'll share a little bit of a story of a family counselor in Grapevine who was extremely introverted. And we got to just get over that hurdle. We have to introduce ourselves to people and we have to ask the question. So I met with her for coffee once a week on Friday mornings and just role played. Okay, you got to ask me this question every time. And you got to hush and not be so nervous if I just sit there and stare at you. The role play helped a lot. So if you can find somebody to do that with, it helps a lot. But I swear, if this young lady can get over it, you can too. She was so nervous, shaking, and then by the fourth week, she was fine. And then at that point, it was just hammering on the details of her speech pattern, her presentation, what to not ask for. Because then she got excited and she started asking for a lot of stuff. And it was great to see. I was really proud of her. In 10 months, she had a fully developed book of business for her family counseling practice because she just got excited about it because she could see the measurable results. So that's typically what I found in my practice. If you're an introvert, it's the concept of the issue that really bothers you. But if I see factual numbers, then that helps me understand if I'm being successful or not. Numbers kind of helps you get over some of that fear. Now, how do I measure this? How do I account for my contacts? I don't care if you do it on a Big Chief tablet with a crayon. Write every person you're talking to down, write every contact down, track your numbers. There are CRM tools out there you can use. Monday.com is one. There are a bunch of them. You can do it in Excel. It doesn't really matter. You can do it in Outlook, but it's a little bit harder. But I want you to track through a CRM application who you're talking to, what you talked about, and what the results were. And then once a week, measure that. Did I talk to 40 new people this week? What was the result? Who did they introduce me to? When am I planning on contacting them? Because if you see the ratios, and you can start to understand how much you need to manage those contact qualities a little bit better by asking it maybe a different way, or you need, instead of going to an HR manager, maybe you need to go to a pastoral care minister, whomever, whatever your natural sweet spot is. Once you figure that out, those numbers are going to tell you who that is. And that's who you connect with. And that's how you start to develop that patient book. Does that make sense?
And I would say too, I think you guys have an advantage to me. You all have an advantage over, let's say, someone that's, in their middle 20s coming out with a master's degree. You guys have a lot of life experience and other job experiences that have helped you. So you have contacts through that as well, which can really be helpful. Like, for example, if you, like, I know right now we've got a couple of people that have been teaching. Like, if you're a teacher, that's a great world to jump into. So just kind of think about the world that you're in and the places that you like, the kind of your work history too. Even I love the idea of the HR departments, HR managers. Because the reason why that's super helpful is because most typically they are also passionate about mental health too, right? So they're also like the kind of the soft skills kind of stuff they do with their employees anyway. So you can really, honestly, if you were entrepreneurial enough, and I wish I would have thought about this 10 years ago, if I'd have met Chris then, we really could have done something.
Yeah, it's
I
my
wish
loss.
I wish I would have thought about things like EAP contracting, because you can go in and help certain companies and provide mental health services for them just through contracting with them. I mean, there's things like that out there, and I know that's a little bit in the weeds, but it depends on how big you think and what you think you can do. And if you think you can do that, you probably can.
Don't be scared.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to ask. All they can say is no. And then you can ask them again.
The other question I get a lot of times is things such as, are chamber of commerce events helpful? No, they're not good for what we do. They're good for community service if you want to participate in your community from a business aspect, but they typically don't result in great qualified contacts and prospects and patients in our case. So I would, if you want to support the local chamber or a Rotary group or a Lions Club or something like that, by all means, support your community, but don't rely upon it for business networking. Business networking cannot be delegated to somebody else until you get a well-established practice, and maybe an administrative assistant can help manage it a little bit better for you, but you're it to start. The chamber event is not going to do it. The Lions Club event is not going to do it. You're it. So go feed the pipeline. You can do it. Any questions on networking?
I do want to mention one other thing, and I'm working on this behind the scenes a little bit in regards to networking. Kind of this new era of digital marketing that we're in now. In the past, our profession has shied away from that for confidentiality reasons. Some of that's changing. So I'm actually trying to get. Amerton is in the process of developing a digital marketing like program through their business department. And I'm actually trying to get a couple of those folks to come talk to us about digital marketing. Some of you might do that now just in your life, like on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, and that's new. And then I'm talking about new in the last 5 or 6 years. And so that's another part when we think about marketing and networking, that is another way to reach people, another way to get yourself out there. One of Diana, who I worked with at Redefining Keller, has done a great job of marketing herself. And she's basically created her own kind of presence
Brand.
on Facebook and brand.
Yep.
And I've gotten tons of pointers from her. She's been super helpful in that area. So, and again, it's kind of like what Chris was saying earlier. That's for some people, and that's not for everybody. Some people really are like it and good at it. Some people not so much. So that's just something to keep in mind. I wanted to bring that up before I forgot, because I'm trying to get someone to kind of come and talk to us about that a little bit. So
if I can also, and Chris, I may be offering a little bit of counter to that, but I want to give a word of caution on that I've experienced on the social marketing, the digital marketing piece. You don't necessarily get to control who's contacting you.
No, you don't. That's right.
In the networking world, I'm finding my sweet spot. In the digital marketing world, it's everybody who can read and is clicked on that is going to hit me up.
Yeah.
And that can be a little bit overwhelming for some, because I have to sift through all of that information, contacts, to find where the real meat of this thing is, versus in networking. Again, I'm going back to that question, who do you know that I would enjoy meeting? Well, I'm kind of calling it right there on the front end by saying, hey, here's who I am. Introduce me to people who I would meet that would bless me and I could bless as well. I don't get that in digital marketing.
Yeah. The only thing I would say about that, this is why it's a very specific approach. Like, I'll give you Facebook as an example. You can get super, super specific about who even sees your posts or who you're trying to get to see your post, versus I have a Facebook page and I'm just going to start putting stuff out there, and then anybody can jump on there and say whatever they want. Right. So there's a little bit of difference. On the flip side of all of this, research wise, we know for a fact, face-to-face communication is still the best networking tool that we have, even through COVID. That's probably still, I haven't seen any of the studies in the last year, But up until 2 years ago, face-to-face networking was always number one.
Yeah, you got to run them both.
Yeah.
I think that ends it for me, Chris, unless you have something or somebody has questions, be happy to address anything you guys have.
Does anybody have any questions?
Okay. Well, guys,
I've got a couple. Just
Okay.
Just one. How would we go about finding someone like a CPA, like a law? You know, how does that happen? How do we find somebody?
you asked for one in that networking process, right? Do you know a CPA that I would enjoy meeting that understands how to provide services to professional counseling office? So we got the blessing of quite a few around here, but a lot of us, like a lot of industry, we're retiring, right? And so you need to be sure you got somebody you trust in that sense that knows what they're doing. I would say you don't need to get engaged with a very large CPA firm when you're starting out, because they get a little bit expensive and you don't get the intimacy and the availability a lot of times. So I would say one, I can give a few names to Chris Bedard that if you want to do that, I can give you a couple of names to refer just to get started. But I would say you're going to have to ask, do you know a CPA that I would enjoy meeting, and who would that be?
Do you know a CPA that I can? Do you know a CPA that I enjoy meeting? You know,
I do, and I'm going to give that name to Chris, and I'll let him distribute it. Good question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for offering.
Here's the other thing I was going to ask too, because a lot of folks will jump into the 1099 contract world as they start getting their hours for licensure. Some people might be an employee, a W-2 employee, but some people might be a 1099. When they go into that process, is there like contract wise, because everyone signs a contract, you know, when you do that, are there some things to be thinking about or looking at when they do that, go through that process? I mean, I know things I would suggest, but from the financial tax income standpoint, what would you say?
Yeah, so just recognize that, again, as a 1099 person, you're not having tax withheld from your check because you're not an employee. As a 1099 person, you're effectively self-employed. You're a sole proprietor. You just happen to get a 1099. So going back to those quarterly estimated payments, when you receive those monies, you're going to have those same 4 dates that we're going to need to make a tax payment on. So just think of it, go back to that concept of being self-employed. That 1099 income is income. And I have expenses associated with that, business meals, supplies, those kinds of things. If I went and bought a new computer that I only use for work, that's an expensable item. So those kinds of things, yes, that you're basically a self-employed individual under a 1099 associate program, if you will.
Good. And the other thing that I've mentioned this in other classes, when you look at those contracts that you sign with, whether it's a private practice or another agency, and you're going to be contracted, look at the percentages that you're going to be making, because a lot of times it's a split percentage, right? You're gonna get 60% and they're going to get 40 or something like that. Be mindful of those things. Sometimes you can negotiate those percentages. And the other thing is looking at what it means if you leave there, right? Like if you say, hey, I'm going to go get a job at this other place over here. Well, if I leave, can I take clients with me or not? Or do I have a non-compete kind of clause in my contract? Some folks will put that in, some won't, but that's just something to look at beforehand when you're signing. Because a lot of you will, as you get out and graduate and take your exam and get your associate license, you know, you'll be working at a place where, you know, you can get paid, and that's good. That's a good thing. You just want to be mindful of some of those things when you're, and that should be, if those things aren't in the contract, then you need to ask about it because you don't want to get surprised later. Oh, by the way, we're going to do this. And if I'm being honest, if it was me, I would think twice about working there. If that wasn't really specifically laid out, that means they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants a bit, and you don't want that happening to you, if that makes sense. spoken like someone that has had that experience. That's not a fun
Hmm.
experience. So
I get a lot of that.
I know.
I get a lot of those questions.
Yeah. So anybody else have any other questions? Awesome. All right.
Well, guys, I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Great questions. I wish you great success. So go forward and make it happen.
Thanks, man.
Thank
You
you so
got it.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for it.
All right. I'm gonna
wants
stay
to talk too.
I'm gonna stay around for maybe like 20 minutes. If anybody has any like class related or any kind of other question related to class, I'll just kind of stick around. Angela, I think you're muted. I can't hear you. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Oh no.
There you go. Now we got it.
Okay, all right. I have a question about our hours.
Yep.
So I'm on track to get my administrative hours and supervision hours.
Mhm.
Direct client contact, I'm at about 75 right now.
Okay.
I'm still gonna make progress over the next couple of weeks, but is there a number specifically? Like, should I aim for 90 to 100 or?
Okay, let's see. 1, 2. You got 3 weeks from tonight. So you need 25 hours ish,
Mhm,
which is like 8 hours a week,
mhm,
roughly.
mhm.
What I've been telling people is if you want to supplement that with mock sessions with people, you can do that.
Okay.
If you want to supplement that with some of this class time, that would be okay to do. We've done that
Okay.
before. We're not gonna like turn people away if they get, really close. You know what I mean? Like really close. And
Mhm.
if you turned in 75, that'd be too far away, but we're 3 weeks away, right? You've got a
Yeah.
little bit of time to get
Mhm.
there. I think you should be okay.
Okay. Alright.
And now during COVID, we had to get real creative, right? Because it was just hard. So we had
Mhm.
people like classmates meeting together doing mock sessions and people meeting with their families, so you can
Mhm.
do some of those things.
Okay.
And then the other thing I've been telling people is talk to your supervisors about it, because sometimes they can be creative too and get you like, hey, let me get you in this group over here. There's other ways that maybe they know of too that can help you get those hours.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Dr. Bedard, you just mentioned we could do like some mock sessions.
Uh-huh.
Who would approve those? So would we have to speak with our supervisor to talk to them about what we're doing and have them approve those hours?
Yeah, you can. I haven't had anyone not approve that yet.
Okay.
So if that's a problem, let me know. But that should be. I think. How many are you going to be close?
Yes,
Hours?
I don't know if you recall, I'm the one, I have like 3 sites and I'm trying to
Okay.
piece all my hours together there, and I'm going to be close.
Okay. Do you know how many you have right now?
Right after this session, I'm going to just go and add them up. I started this week. I took vacation from my job and I'm just working full time at a place this week to try to get as many hours as I can.
Okay. Yeah, I know it can get 3 weeks. You get 3 weeks away and you start getting a little worried. But yeah, just anything we can do to help will help. We're going to try to help as much as we can.
Okay.
So if you add your hours up and they're like, I've got 60 hours, let me know,
Okay.
contact me and let's see if we can figure that out.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And the assignments that you have, I know I've turned in the QEP paper that you were asking, but the book report and like the class reflection, can we turn those in at our in-person with you next class, or?
Just turn it, you can just load it on Moodle. You can just put everything on Moodle. Y'all can
Okay.
turn those in all the way up until May 19th. you can turn them in anytime. Some people have already turned them in, some people haven't. It's
Okay.
Yep. Someone's asking about hours for this semester.
It was me, because
Yeah.
sorry, I thought I misunderstood. So I thought that we only need 60 to 70 direct contact hours with clients this semester, 30 to 40 admin, and then the 10 supervisor, and then the 40 hours of class time, right?
That's correct. I think we're just saying total altogether for both classes,
Oh.
you need 100 direct and
Thank
200
you.
admin. Yeah. So that's just a way to help you guys keep track, is divided it up by practicum. So you need kind of half practicum 1 and maybe half practicum 2. I just look at the total, because by the time you guys get to me, typically you're kind of on the back end of those hours. So yeah, you don't need 100 more. You just need 100 total.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a heart attack. Thank you.
Yeah, I would have a heart attack too. So for those listening at home to the recording, you need 100 total direct hours and 200 non-direct hours. Unless you're doing the LMFT, then you get to do a whole other practicum. Awesome. Any other questions?
Yeah, just to confirm, we're only going to have one more class session after this. Is that correct?
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have one in person, which is going to be next Thursday, the 5th, in Garland. And then the following Thursday, the 12th, we'll have an in-person in Garland. And then I'm going to have one last like Zoom class that week, the last week of class. Not on Thursday, because that's the very last day, probably another Wednesday night, just as a way of, I just usually do that as a way of kind of, if there's anything random, weird that's come up. By the time we get to the last week, most of the things have already kind of been covered and everybody's good and everything's fine. So we will meet next week in Garland, the next 2 weeks in Garland, and then technically that'll be it. Now, obviously, you don't have to be there, but it's, so we'll keep kind of going on this kind of discussions that we've been having. So I had to make a couple of changes because when I did the schedule, I wasn't aware that was my daughter's last theater performance of the semester, and my son's got something. I mean, I didn't know, I wasn't thinking about that. And so I had to kind of shuffle some things around for that. So, all right. Y'all don't need to know all that. I don't know why I told you all that.
I just have a quick question. I'm studying for the NCE exam, and can I count those hours as indirect?
Sure, why not?
That's what I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah, anything like that can be, you can count. Okay. Yeah, I would say yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, that's good. That's client related. For sure.
Dr. Bedard, is the official last day of the semester the 19th of May? Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
So that if we need to tell our practicum site for sure, like that's the last day we do anything with them. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And then there is graduation on the 20th. Actual face-to-face live graduation. I'm actually going to be there. It's the first one I've been to since COVID. Is anyone going to graduate, like go to the graduation? I'm just curious.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you should.
My hours, I will.
You're going to do it. You're going to finish. You're going to be all right. You're going to make it.
I mean, I paid for all that. I'm not sure if I was going to do it. People was pressuring me to do it, but I was like, I don't know. I don't know yet.
Well, you got to do it. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't.
A whole bunch of stuff.
It doesn't mean that you don't graduate. It just, it's just a ceremony. But all right.
I'll come back
questions?
and get my LMFT degree, and then I'll do it then.
Yeah, there you go. Now we're talking. Any other questions about anything?
Yeah, just to recap, because I plan on continuing at my site after practicum. And so I can do the third practicum even if I graduate and just use that to take me through the NCE and all that, correct?
The extended practicum. Yeah.
So it's not practicum 3, it's extended practicum?
That's right. Practicum 3
Okay.
is only for LMFT students.
Okay.
So, and I actually teach the extended practicum, but we just talk a couple of times. It's not because you're just, usually people do it if they want to study and keep seeing clients. That's why people do it.
Okay. Because I'm going to need to do that in order to,
Yeah,
float myself across. So,
no,
okay.
I got you. I'm with you. That makes sense. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you for bringing Chris on. That was very, very helpful.
Good. Yeah, I knew. Well, he's awesome. I knew it would be helpful. I've been trying to get him to do it for a while, so now I got him roped in. So tell your friends. We're working on doing something like this broadly for, like, profession wide for alumni and everything. So we're kind of trying to figure out how to do it. I think it can be helpful. I didn't get any of this information when I was where you guys are. Nothing. I mean, I wasn't thinking about anything. So good.
Thank you.
All right. Now
Thank
y'all
you.
go do something else.
Thanks.
I got one more question.
Yeah.
How would you record the hours for the study material? I mean, for studying for the NCE. How would you record that?
That'd
You
be
just put
like
them as hours?
yeah, that'd be like your administration hours or non-direct hours.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
All right.
Yeah.
And do we have to label it as such? Or not just put the hours in.
No, I just put I mean, you could put what it is, but it still should count.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you could count. That's the other thing when you start getting your hours for your licensure, that would be similar. Like doing a CEU course is the same. That's all. You can count, like reading something. All those things are countable. You can count all those.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
See you next week.
Thank you.
See you next week.
So we don't go tomorrow. So we don't have it tomorrow?
No, we're good, man.
Oh, okay. Good. All right.
Yeah. Next week. Next Thursday.
Next Thursday. All right.
All right.
See you. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Oh, wait. Don't hang up yet. Let me check this chat. Oh, all right. It's just people saying, all right, thanks.
Bye.